Good afternoon. This session is on leadership, a moral dilemma. And I will admit to you freely that, quite freely, that when I was volunteered to chair this session and introduce our next speaker, I was both pleased and worried. Pleased because of my admiration and respect for her. Worried because of what do you say about such a distinguished person, educator, and yes, a philosopher. You know, prior to meeting this person, I used to think that philosophy was unintelligible answers to insoluble problems, and that it was a study which enabled humans to be unhappily more intelligently, and that a philosopher was a fool who tormented himself while he was alive so he could be talked about when he was dead. Sister changed my mind about that. I remember back in the class in 1968, sometime into the course, I went and said, "Sister, I'm totally and absolutely confused." And she says, "Never mind, young man, out of confusion comes learning." So I've learned to live my life in a total state of confusion. Who is this person? Known to me as Sister Nolasco. Sister has spent many years in education, both in teaching and administration. She has taught in schools and at the university, at the undergraduate level at Memorial, and at the graduate level at University of Ottawa. At different times, she was principal of St. Bride's College, Littledale, principal of Holy Heart of Mary Regional High School, St. John's, head of educational foundations and director of graduate studies in education at the University of Ottawa. She holds a BA from Mount St. Vincent University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, an MA from Catholic University of America in Washington, and a PhD from the University of Ottawa. Since her retirement from teaching at the University of Ottawa, she has been teaching full-time philosophy of education at Memorial. She has also done some supervision of student teachers in St. John's and in central Newfoundland. Presently, she's an executive member of the St. John's Roman Catholic School Board and chairs the curriculum committee of that board. She also serves on the student evaluation and scholarship committees of the Department of Education. Her interest in writing and publishing has been and is in the area of philosophy and history of education. I think others have spoken more eloquently than I of her contribution to the field of education. Let it suffice to say that education today is better because of her contribution. I think anyone who has met her knows her insight, her concern for excellence, the depth of her humanity, and the strength of her conviction. I would like to conclude this introduction with a verse from Ines Thorson, which probably speaks to her conviction. "The man who cannot settle in his mind where he should stand, but merely stays astride the fence, is certain in the end to prove himself of little worth to either side. But he alone will be of value who, though sometimes pressures may be brought to bear, knows in his heart where he should stand, and then, despite the consequences, stands firmly there." I know she will stand firmly here. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Mary Mulcahy.
Thank you, Ed. I should say that when I quoted that to you back in 1968, I was really quoting Socrates, because Socrates said, "We begin to learn when we are confused." It wasn't mine, I just want to tell you. Thank you very much. Now, I really don't know where to begin. The title of this is Leadership, a Moral Dilemma. Now, first of all, we have to establish, evidently we have a moral dilemma. So what I'm going to do first, I'm just going to look at some terms. I think we have to establish what are the terms I'm going to use. Then I'm going to spend a few minutes seeing how did we get where we are. You know, there's an old expression which says, if we want to know who we are, we should know where we've been. No, we should know where we've come from and where we've been. And incidentally, talking about that, though I think it's meant in a different context, the Irish have a toast which reads, "May we have the hindsight to know where we've come from, the foresight to know where we're going, and the insight to know when to stop." All right. I think you can add on to that what that means. So I'm going to do that, going just to look very, very briefly at how we've reached this dilemma, and then look for a moment at the hopeful climate that is emerging. Now, I'm going to use the word hopeful rather than optimistic, and I'm going to tell you why. A French philosopher, Gabriel Marcel, says there's a difference between hope and optimism. We're optimistic about something if we think something will happen because a similar happening took place in the past. But if we're hopeful, we have nothing on the past to fall back on, so we just hope. So I'm just hoping that we've reached the nadir in our moral mess, and we're on the way up. And then I hope to touch you, to put you on the spot, to examine your own selves with respect to how you accomplish your moral duty in the work you're doing. Now, I understand that most of you here are in roles of leadership, either principals or vice principals. The fact that you are school administrators, it is your job to make decisions, to make choices. And has it ever occurred to you that many, I would say most of your decisions, are based on moral judgments? The very fact that you are dealing with human beings lends a moral tone to your decisions. Every system of moral demands, says the noted American sociologist Reef, must operate within some social order. I'm simply saying the fact that you and I are working in a social milieu automatically says we're working in a moral milieu. Now, what do we mean by moral and morality? Very, very simply. Moral simply means right or wrong, good or bad. Morality simply means the science of right or wrong, good or bad, in human conduct. And when I'm talking about value, I'm really talking about a good for ourselves or for others, for society, which is capable of realization. C.S. Lewis, and I'm sure you're familiar with C.S. Lewis and the Screwtape Letters, he said, morality seems to be concerned with three things. Firstly, with fair play and harmony between individuals. Secondly, with what might be called tidying up or harmonizing the things inside each individual. And thirdly, with the general purpose of human life. And with number two, I would like to just define very briefly the word conscience, because I think ultimately, you and I, we have to live with our own consciences. Now, again, you go back to children, and honestly, I don't see anything wrong with having told children that, you have this little voice within you which tells you when to do right and when to avoid wrong. But I'm going to use it in the sense that conscience is our ultimate norm of human responsibility. Now, for you and me, that's what it is. It's our ultimate norm of human responsibility. And very, very many times, you're going to have to revert to the dictates of your conscience. And don't forget that you're in a job which is lonely quite often. I think you've heard of the lonely at the top syndrome. I think most administrators suffer from it. Respect for other persons, so well formulated by Kant's principle that we should treat people as ends and never as means to our ends, is the basis of morality. Using other people as means to our ends is wrong. Now, I'm going to tell you right from the very beginning, I am not pussyfooting around morality. I'm calling upon, I have followed over the years what has been said and written by William Bennett, the former Secretary of Education in the United States, who is now with the Bush cabinet in charge of drugs. And if there's any man or woman who'll get after the drug peddlers, it will be he. But he said, the time has come when somebody has to say to our children, there is a right or there is a wrong. We have been avoiding this issue all along. Anything goes. So I will be saying there is a right or there is a wrong. I might be dating myself, but I'm not pussyfooting about it. It is a violation of the sacredness which belongs to human beings because they are human beings. Now, I don't know whether any of you are familiar with the writings of Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Prize winner, 1968, called by the Norwegian Nobel Committee a witness for truth and justice. Now, his philosophy, if it wasn't exactly born, it was refined in Auschwitz. And here's what he has to say. I read recently an interview that was given him by an American periodical, and I read a couple of his novels. And his novels are based on his life in Auschwitz. Here's what he said. If there was one word I would like to imprint on everything I do, it is the word humanize. We are here to search for truth about God, about human beings, about life. Truth should elevate everyone. It should bring people together, not separate them. And when he was asked, what is your aim? What do you purpose to do for students? He said, my first goal is to inspire students to respect one another, which means they should be there to help each other, not to judge one another. It's worthwhile if you can get any of his writings. Again, I would suggest to you, in similar vein, you have Viktor Frankl, whose philosophy was also refined in the German concentration camp. He has written Man's Search for Meaning, and he has also written The Doctor and the Soul. But I think all of these would help us in trying to understand just what it is to be human. Morality encompasses such values as fairness, kindness, respect for human dignity, equal rights, freedom, social and economic justice, tolerance of diversity, rule of law with civility, mutual assistance, self-restraint, self-respect, and so on. Observance of the golden rule, do unto others as you would have done unto you, ensures the practice of moral virtues. Now, I'm saying the word ensures the practice of moral virtues. The golden rule does not, however, furnish us with a supply of values. It tells us what to do as moral beings about the values we already possess. Add to the golden rule the biblical norm, love your neighbor as yourself, and we get the Christian dimensions of morals. Now, I've just been trying to explain what I mean by morals and morality. To have one's standards and to adhere to them today is not easy in a rapidly changing world where a relative code of morality has been taken for granted. You and I are living in a world where sometimes I think of that play, The Green Pastures, where the archangel looked down from heaven at the mess below and said, all's nailed down is coming loose. Now, there are times when we think of that everything is nailed down, is coming loose. And I think it aptly applies today. There is a perception, there's a fundamental disagreement between what is right and what is wrong. Should this be so? Let us look at some of the reasons for this perception. Now, you see, our students are growing up in a world where there is immorality along all sides of them. Look at what's happening in the political world and in the business world. Look at the inside trading on Wall Street. Look at Bill Bennett out in British Columbia under scrutiny now for the same sort of thing. Look at that member of the government who was recently indicted. Look at the trouble now that Bush is having, trying to see, will he or will he not accept John Tower as the Secretary of Defense, when there is impaled against him wine, women, and wrongs. Now, I think they've gotten around the wine, and they've gotten around the women, but they still have to settle the wrongs. Now, this is so ironic now, because you remember one of Bush's main platforms was, we're going to clear up the moral mess in the White House. We're going to have a clean government. And right now, this is thrown straight into his lap. He wants to appoint Tower, but there are others who do not. Again, I don't have to go outside of Newfoundland. When I think, and you think, just as well to face it, the heinous conduct that you and I have witnessed in people in whom our young people were supposed to have trust. Now, I won't go into that any farther, but I'm calling it, it's a heinous, it's unforgivable, anything I can call it, despicable, anything I can call it. So what I'm saying, no wonder the angel Gabriel would look down and say, all's nailed down, it's coming loose. Because we don't have to go to the States, it's coming loose right here. For the last few decades, cultural relativity, I'm going to emphasize those two words, cultural relativity and values neutrality have become watchwords in education. See, it's very, very easy for you and me just to ignore, to take a neutral position. It's very, very easy for us to take anything goes, and that's where we stand. You see, we live in an age, you and I guess I'm older than all of you, where, you see, getting involved is not the thing today. We don't get involved. And yet, I don't want to be negative here, because when I think of all the people that I see are involved in helping the poor, with soup kitchens and all the rest of the work, I really can't, in conscience, say that we don't get people involved. But you know, as administrators, I wonder, do we always face up to difficulties? Are we really able to confront a difficulty? If you have something that's going on in your staff, going on among the students, do you have the courage to confront it? Now, first of all, I'll come back to this. There are two things involved in all this moral education. First of all, we have to know, and then we have to have the courage. Not the courage, we have to be able to make a decision. These are two essentials of any moral act. We must know right and wrong, and number two, we must be free to make a decision. If these components are missing, then I can't say we have a moral act. That's what I mean by a human act. A human act is an act that I perform with perfect knowledge of it, and that I make my choice to do the right or to do the wrong. Now, this trend of relativity and neutrality, I would say, crested in the 70s. Some sociologists say we have become in our society more of a therapeutic community, where being good has been replaced by feeling good. Now, I could give you really two very interesting writers in this area. You have Philip Reeve, who wrote The Triumph of the Therapeutic, and Christopher Lasch. I have both listed, in the bibliography. Christopher Lasch, who wrote The Culture of Narcissism. And we've been surrounded by this culture of narcissism, a turning in on ourselves, preoccupation with self. So good or bad is relative to how I feel. Now, I don't know whether you are aware, that is widely found in our society. If I do something and I feel good about it, it doesn't matter whether the thing is really good or not, but if I feel good, then it's good. So we're not concerned what is really right or wrong, but with that decision, we can be comfortable with. The easiest solution is sometimes the solution by elimination. Now, this joke on Dan Quayle is not nice, but I'm going to read it nevertheless. This reminds me of something I read in an American magazine last summer in the aftermath of the Dan Quayle's controversy. The expression to quail was given, and it was defined as to confront a critical moral issue by ignoring it. I think it's a beautiful definition, to confront a critical moral issue by ignoring it. Philip Reeve sees the instability in society for the confusion about morality. Traditional influences of family, church, school, and country have been supplanted by such forces as movies, health clubs, shopping malls, etc. Long-standing values have been eroded under the impact of a whole series of isms. I spoke of narcissism, pragmatism. Now, there are two ills, as far as I'm concerned, which result from pragmatism. Pragmatism is the philosophy of change. Everything has changed. Education has changed, values have changed, and therefore we come what we call social morality. If society says it's right, then it's right. Pragmatism, where what is good is what is useful. Who we are is not important, but what can we do? People are not interested in you as a human being, but what marketable skills have you? And in education, now this is where I'm going to give the knock to us in education. In education, this is bolstered by the industry model of management, something that is given added impetus by the goodies of the technological revolution. There is the temptation in this product-oriented milieu to be obsessed with the efficient running of the organization. A dehumanizing environment produces restlessness and compulsions. People are driven and appear to be unable to relax. There's a general feeling of helplessness and resignation, and the consequent erosion of hope. Do you know, I don't think that you and I realize how much hopelessness there is out there in our teachers and in our students, in society in general. I'm sure you're familiar with the great international scholar on stress, Hans Selye. He wrote his autobiography and he called it The Stress of My Life. He died last year in Montreal. He said, "A large portion of our youth has no final aim." And the philosopher, theologian, and scientist, Teilhard de Chardin, tells us, "The future is in the hands of those who will have been able to give to tomorrow's generation a reason to live and to hope." Now that's you and me. I think that's a tremendous challenge, to give to tomorrow's generation a reason to live and to hope, because a lot of our young people don't see any meaning in life. And meaning is one of the key words today in our educational system. However, so much for the pessimistic side of it. I am really encouraged by the amount of hope that seems to be sounding. It is said that a culture shift is taking place in American and Canadian education, and educators once again are growing alert to the impact of such words as good and virtuous. People are not ashamed to use the word good again and to use the word virtuous. A Gallup poll in the United States in 1985 showed that an overwhelming number of people want their children to be taught two things: to speak and write correctly, and a standard of right and wrong. Dr. Greer, recently appointed Dean of the School of Education in Boston University, in an interview last summer, expressed the hope that his university would produce teachers who were able to do two things. That's what he emphasized: who are able to ask questions that stimulate their students and who can provide them with a moral education. He believes that all teachers, and I'm quoting, all teachers should be able to stand up and talk about values such as integrity, friendship, and courage. He is aware that people may disagree about what values should be taught, but he is convinced that there are principles all agree on: respect, friendliness. Parents don't object to those things. And incidentally, I have an article here by Bennett. It was an address he delivered to the National School Boards Association in Washington, December 22nd of last year. Here's what he said: "I have spent a good deal of my time as Secretary of Education talking about character. Now I'm going to ask you, how often today do we hear the old-fashioned word, so prominent in English education, the development of character? Because exactly that's what moral education is doing. We are developing character. I've said that schools, teachers, and principals must help develop good character. I've said that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to add special courses or devise new materials for the purpose of instilling character in the young. There is no great trick to this task. Parents and teachers have been doing it for centuries. We simply need to put students in the presence of adults of sound character, who will articulate it to children, who will remind them of the human experience with that difference, and who will live that difference in front of them. Aristotle gave us this prescription more than 2,000 years ago. In order to teach good character, expose children to good character, and invite its imitation." Now that's what he has said. Well, so much for the causes of the moral dilemma. Now what can we do about it? The French writer Albert Camus said, "There's a whole civilization to be remade." Well, I'm not going to come along and say it's as drastic as this. While we may agree that the situation is so drastic, we must come to realize that there is a rebuilding to be done. What can you as administrators do about it? You're going to need courage. Now, I don't know last year whether any of you read the convocation address given at Duke University, North Carolina, by Ted Koppel. Now, you're all familiar with Ted Koppel, the ABC Nightline host. Here is what he had to say. Now, I'm going to quote it for you without any comment. "We have gradually convinced ourselves that slogans will save us. Shoot up if you must, but use a clean needle. Enjoy sex whenever and with whomever you wish, but use a condom. No. The answer is no. Not because it isn't cool or smart, or because you might end up in jail or dying in an AIDS ward, But no, because it's wrong. Because we have spent 5,000 years as a race of rational human beings trying to drag ourselves out of the primeval slime, searching for truth and moral absolutes. In its purest form, truth is not a polite tap on the shoulder. It is a howling reproach. What Moses brought down from Mount Sinai were not 10 suggestions. Your students are growing up in an atmosphere of ambience. You're going to have to cope with peer pressure and the achievement syndrome, which militate against the best efforts of you and your teachers. Mark Twain once said that to be good and virtuous is a noble thing, but to teach others to be good and virtuous is nobler still and much easier. Were he around today, I think he'd think differently. There's a decision that you and your teachers must take. Now, what I'm going to say in the next couple of minutes, to me, is pivotal to the stand that you're going to take on moral education. Are you going to teach a morality? Now, when I'm saying teach, I'm looking at two things about you. First of all, as administrators, you're responsible for the whole school for teachers now. You are responsible for the way moral education is taught in your school. Now, I'm not talking about going in and teaching moral values. I'm talking about the whole gamut. The very fact that we have a classroom where human beings congregate of necessity makes that a moral atmosphere. Are you going to teach a morality linked with faith or a purely secular moral code? There is a Christian moral code which requires a knowledge of the gospel and fidelity to its word. There is also a moral code not derived from revelation or doctrine, but knowable by moral reasoning alone. There are universal moral values outside the pale of any scriptures. There are universal moral values. The American Declaration of Independence affirms certain truths that are self-evident. There are occasions when, to avoid sectarian arguments, we may have to use commonly shared ethical reasonings in an atmosphere of civility. But I am going to say right here, I'm going to ask a question. It's a rhetorical question. In a province which traditionally considered itself connected with Christian education, do you people have to apologize if you are talking about a Christian moral code? I'm telling you, if you or I went to Iran, it's not very nice to talk about Iran today, considering that the Ayatollah has sent out a hue and cry to kill Rushdie, over that book that he wrote. You and I wouldn't go in and upset the apple cart. I would expect the Iranians to respect me, but I wouldn't expect them to abandon their Muslim code for me. Same if I went to India. I think we have to be very careful. And this is what I'm saying. I think we do a little bit too much pussyfooting. Do we or do we not have a Christian system of education? And that Christian system of education doesn't exclude those who have no religion or those who have non-Christian religions. Because if there's anything we should be able to teach is tolerance of diversity of views. But I'm just asking the question, do you have to opt for a secular moral code? I am saying that if you do, you are falling short of what you should be doing. The combination of the natural, that is, you don't have to be a Christian to be a good man or woman. There have been many excellent good men and women who have no religious faith. And I always like to put it this way, talking about Moses. When Moses came down from the mountain with the 10 Commandments, and these 10 Commandments were written, I'm saying lying was not lying, or killing was not killing, because a commandment said it was, but the commandment said it was because it was wrong. I mean, that's the point we have to make. There is a natural moral code. Now, the combination of the natural and the revealed is clearly given us by John Geoghegan, a professor of political science at Illinois State University. Here's what he has to say. Morality has a natural basis that makes its principles accessible to every thinking person. Morality is much broader than religion in that it includes principles drawn from sources other than those contained in a supernatural revelation. Nevertheless, Morality can be, and in the case of Judeo-Christianity, has been brought within religion and made a part of it. For while the author